Hey all, we're so excited at how popular Kites and Strings is becoming. Who'd have thunk that within only 5 or 6 months, we would have been listened to in over 30 countries and well over 400 different cities. We're especially thrilled with the variety and caliber of guests that we've been able to bring on, and it's so cool how we're finding similarities in their exercising of creativity. However, avid listeners will also point to how everybody seems to bring their own individual and slightly different interpretation and focus on the topic of creativity. Another thing that we've noticed is that producing a podcast like this takes some work. Now we're happy that we've gotten some backup help from folks like Russell Wu, who you may remember from episode 13. He's connecting with my son, Ethan Morrow Plume, to explore analytics so that we can optimally tailor and market our podcast. So that's been really cool. And we've also been receiving artist relations work from the likes of Maddie Schmidt and Olivia Seifert, both amazing artists in their own right. Still, to help us sustain our efforts and to allow a few days to regroup from time to time, Kites and Strings will be doing some re-releases. We did this once over the winter holidays when we re-released episode 8 with Steve Buckdill. Today we will re-release episode 10, Nerissa Bradley, What Can I Create? We chose this one because it's one of the first episodes featuring an international guest. And, after learning of our popularity abroad, we are stepping up our efforts to interview creatives from all over so as to get a sense as to how different cultures view creativity and the arts. What's different with this re-release and future re-releases is that it will premiere as an episode on YouTube. So now, in addition to being able to hear Kites and Strings on all podcast search engines, you can stream us on YouTube. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Kites and Strings Podcast, which is the same name for our Facebook page. On Instagram, we are kites_and_strings, and we're also now on Twitter at Kites and Strings. So please, pick your favorite platforms and like, subscribe, follow, retweet, or whatever. But for now, just enjoy this re-release of Nerissa Bradley, What Can I Create? Welcome to Kites and Strings, the podcast where we explore creativity, balance, and the tension that exists as we find our creative selves. My name is Steve Plume. Like me, my co-host, Catherine Shinnock, is a registered art therapist and a licensed clinical professional counselor from Chicagoland. She's left Chicago for New York City to practice and create in the Big Apple. Hopefully, we will shed light on the many facets of the arts, being creative, and living a balanced, fulfilled life. Today's guest is Nerissa Bradley, and in no particular order, as she seems to flow between them all effortlessly, is an actor and voiceover artist who has worked on several national and international advertising campaigns. She's a speaker who has graced the TED Talk stage with her speech entitled, Why You Stopped Being Creative. She is a musician who has played internationally, including at the Carnegie Hall. And she's a mental health advocate, having been featured in a video called Heartache to Art, which was produced by Celebrating Black Canadian Arts. Oh, and she's a genuinely fun and enjoyable person to talk with. And even though we experienced some minor audio glitches due to Nerissa's zooming in from the UK, it will become crystal clear that Nerissa is driven to grab that string and fly that kite.
You're from Canada?
Yes, I'm from Toronto. Well, I was originally born in Windsor, Ontario,
Okay.
and then I moved to Toronto for university. And
Great.
then now I'm living in London for the last several months. So, yeah.
You've been just trekking east.
Mhm.
That's a big, big change. What was the idea about moving to London?
Well, I always wanted to live in another city.
Mm-hmm.
And I first came to London in 2017 on a solo trip, just with the idea that maybe I wanted to move here. The big pull was the combination of two things. One was just my career in music and in acting, and knowing that they have great training in London as well. And then partially the other side of it was a relationship that I was in that has since ended. But yeah, so there was like the two joint things of like love and career.
A big change.
Yes, but very exciting. And my trip here the first time was like 10 days, and I fell in love with the city. I love how much it has to offer. so much more than what I was getting in Toronto, like more opportunity.
Mhm.
And there's such a great soul scene.
Okay.
Found I was falling in love with British soul music. Like I wasn't necessarily seeking it out, but I would listen to a song and I would find out it was a British artist. I was like, of course it's a British artist.
Of
I
course,
just
right.
So it's been a wonderful journey being here so far. Yeah.
And so as someone else who has moved city to city, were people generally supportive of your move, or were they like, what are you doing?
Do you mean people in my life, like friends and
Yeah.
family?
Yeah.
Everyone was actually very supportive for me. Like a few people thought, are you sure you want to move at this time with Brexit? That was the only thing. My dad was a bit more, well, he was very respectful, but he expressed his opinion about London versus Canada.
Mm.
He's like, you're an adult, it's your decision. But he said he thought it was easier to make a life in Canada. And really, I'm on a 2-year visa. So it's not necessarily like a permanent move. So they all know I'll have to come back at some point.
Okay.
Or maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see.
Oh, love it. The phrase you used, easier to make a life. I feel like that's something that's come up in our conversations, even my conversations about creativity and about parenting specifically, that parents want what's best for their kids and or what they think is best for their kids. I want you to have an easy life. I want you to have a successful life. It almost implies that parents are looking for options that fit their particular framework for what makes the smoother, easier life for their child. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, I think my parents have always wanted me to have the easiest life. And I've typically been going against what they would advise since moving to Toronto. When I moved to Toronto from Windsor when I was 18, I remember being in the backseat of my mom's car, and her and my sister pulled over the car and they were like, you should apply to University of Windsor. It'll be easier for you. You'll have the support of being at home. And I was like, no, I need to get out of this city. It's caving in on me and I just want to be expressed and free and as creative as possible. And moving to a bigger city was that opportunity for me.
Yeah.
And I had that dream from a long time. So I've had to really push time and time again to really have the life that I want versus the easier life, say, that some people in my life would think that I could have, based on just what the creative path looks like.
Yeah.
And it looks like a life of risk.
Yeah.
Of risk taking.
Absolutely. I love that. The creative life is a life of risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of people too say that they wanted to go into something, but they didn't have the courage.
Mm-hmm.
And fits right with that language of risks. And being a parent type, I definitely can understand that. And you want things to go well for your kid and you get a little worried, so I understand both sides for sure.
And I think it took some time for me to actually understand my parents' perspective as well, because I just felt like they were against me for so long, like not really supporting my dreams. But now I can actually understand their world and their perspective, and I can respect that as well. So it's made it a lot easier for our relationship.
Yeah. What do they do?
Well, they're both retired now. Both my parents are retired, but my mom was a nurse.
Okay.
And then my dad worked for Chrysler's on the line for years.
Okay.
Both very steady working people.
Yeah.
And my sister's steady working people as well. One's a nurse practitioner and one works for Pearson International Airport in Toronto. So very steady working people. And Windsor, where I'm from, is a very working class city where you go to school, you get a job, you do that job, and then you retire.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I grew up in that world. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which is industry. It's kind of conservative. The idea of kind of jumping outside the lane is not always the easiest thing. But it sounds like for you, despite having parents who are in sort of really grounded positions, and it sounds like the models that you had around you, at least immediately, were sort of in that vein. What do you think happened that made you be that creative person that jumped out?
Well, it took a while for me to really take that leap. It was something that I always wanted to do. And then I was always being guided back to the steady path that says, maybe if you want to do something creative, but treat that as your plan B, have a plan A. So I did follow what they said for a long time. Like I went to university to be a lawyer because that's what my parents wanted.
Yeah.
And there was an element that I thought maybe I would want that as well, but I knew deep down that who I am as an artist, it's what I went to Toronto for in the first place. I had this battle with pleasing the people that cared about me and then pleasing who I really was. So I think it created difficulties with my own mental health.
It's as if Nerissa were a planet caught in an orbit, and that it took repeated efforts to break free. In essence, Nerissa is smart, and certainly could have gone in many different directions professionally, and many, if presented with the same choices, might have taken the, air quotes, safer and more stable path. But we're going to talk here about the need to be careful and not just thinking that safe and stable means financially set and with a retirement plan. Nerissa recognizes that, and you're going to see too how COVID could have been a factor.
In high school, I was always very creative, and in school, I was always very creative. As a young person, I was drawing and I was painting and I was singing and choirs all the time and doing solo work, and I was taking singing lessons, and there was a lot of creative encouragement, but it was always just don't take it too far, because how are you going to make
It's like
money
the
out of it?
encouragement for that plan B, and it was all fine and good, but like be careful, don't make it plan A.
Yes,
And
exactly.
plan A is the plan of stability in your family. Well, and in your community, not just your family, but the community you were in. It was like you go to school, you go to university, you get the job, you stay at the job, you retire. And it's like you follow that linear path that gives an illusion of stability, I think. I think that's always an illusion, because I personally don't view
I
life
agree.
as a very stable thing. So we're trying to create order in something that is seemingly chaotic, but perfectly ordered in its chaos.
I totally agree with that. I actually did some network marketing at one point because I was like, this could help fund my dreams. I learned later that it wasn't really something but something that I learned out of that process was everything is unstable. There's no stable job and stable career. And I think coronavirus is showing us that as well. We don't have control over our jobs and our lives. Life can just sweep over you. And so it was then, I think I was around 21, that I learned just being independent and being your own source of income and creating that can be so fruitful. So it shifted my focus. And I think from there, the wheel started turning about how can I really pivot and shift out of this world where I'm pleasing other people in my community and needing to be a certain type of person.
I hear a couple things there. One of which, this is just sort of a side, but I love a good snowstorm, something that really sets us on our ass, right? Because it's that reminder that we aren't in control. But going back to that idea of plan A being the stable, secure thing, and it really is on the surface, right? Because if you're not living your true life, then there's going to be upset below the surface, if you will. I always think of maybe Mahatma Gandhi, who says, happiness is when what you think, what you feel, and what you do are in harmony. And if you're not doing what you really think and feel, it's going to cause that disharmony, and it's going to cause upset, and it's going to cause anxiety and depression and all those types of things.
Yes.
So there are consequences for staying in that aforementioned orbit if it's not a fit. I know that both Catherine and I have seen it time and time again in our therapy practices. I tried to convey that with my butchered Mahatma Gandhi quote. He actually said that happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And not to diss the great souled one who peacefully secured freedom for millions, but I like my interpretation more. Or at least I find my interpretation works better in this context.
As an art therapist with a specific focus in spirituality, I find that so many of my clients are coming in with something labeled as depression or labeled as anxiety. And a lot of times when we get into it and start talking, it's that misalignment, when really the path that is their true nature is something that is more risky, is more creative. It seems like that's been a part of your journey as well, is searching internally and finding that path that you need to be on and trusting the abundance of that path.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was still working full time. So I started working full time in marketing, the creative business job to have.
Yes.
It was this period where I had discovered the question, what can I create? Where I had been consuming so much, just buying things. And I had lived with a roommate who was an artist. We had new art in my house all the time. And then she moved out. And then I thought, now my walls are bare. I should buy some new art pieces. But then the question, what can I create, came up. And I decided to have a few friends over and we just painted for an entire evening. And the amount of peace that I got out of that, because I was dealing with anxiety and depression at the time, and peace of mind that I got from that, just painting and just putting on great music. It really got me into painting at the time. And I felt so liberated in so many ways from that experience. And I started thinking like, maybe it's that I haven't been doing the things that I used to do, the things that really bring me joy. And the more I started doing those things, the more the anxiety and depression started to dissipate. But it's not something that's really discussed that often, that, you know, it can just be ailments of the heart and the spirit that happen.
I love that question. What can I create? I mean, I would hope that everybody's asked themselves that on a regular basis.
Yeah. When you phrased it that way, it really struck me, because I think the question that I've posed to people, that we've posed to people, is where do you find inspiration? And I think the question is similar, but it's just a little bit different. Like, not where do I find inspiration? What does it come from? But what can I create? It assumes I can already do it. I can already create. Like, what is it today? What is it tomorrow? What is it next week? Yeah.
I think too, of having listened to your TED Talk about that idea of how creativity sort of gets squashed early on.
That's why I started running art events. I wanted other people to have that same experience without instruction. What can you create? And it started out just being art apartment parties, have people come over, but all just do this. And they just left with this sense of just elation, feeling like they created something that they hadn't done that in so many years without instruction. Maybe you already have it within you, and let's just see what you can do on paper when the environment's provided for you. What comes out?
What was the initial reaction?
Oh, people loved it. One roommate at the time was like, oh, I'm terrible at this. I'm not creative. Then she ended up loving it, and she put what she created on her wall, and she got into photography, and she's still into photography to this day. And she became a really good photographer. Like, she's not doing it full time or anything, but she was really going out there and taking photographs for people. It was just so beautiful to see the difference it made. I also had another friend, because I was combining yoga eventually for these events, yoga and mindfulness with art making. And another friend he was like, oh, I'm not good at yoga. Now he's a total yogi and he's creating all the time. It's just amazing to see people's fears and then them coming out of it feeling so inspired.
Yeah. It was such a simple yet profound question that Nerissa raised to help her really develop the momentum she needed to jump into that liberating place of creating. And I love the art party. And her solution to getting people engaged and to helping them jump into that space was amazing as well.
So how did you support them in overcoming fears, or what do you think helped them in overcoming their fears? Because I think that's a really big block that people face. Like, what do you do? How do you help them?
Oh, when I had these events, I'd usually just have conversations with friends before they would even come over, because a lot of them would have those walls up saying, oh, I can't do this. So it's more of an individualized conversation with everyone to see what's going on for you that has you feel like you can't. And then I would just encourage them to say, well, you can just like finger paint, you can use sponges. It's like playing like you were a kid. Like, it's just, we're just playing and having fun, and we're just listening to really cool music and having a beverage and some good food. It feels good. So I just created this environment that felt warm and friendly and comfortable. And some people would say, oh, I'm just going to watch. I'll come, but I'm just going to watch. I swear those are the people that eventually would just come from the sidelines, from the couch, and then it would be like they would come down to the floor, because we're all like creating on the floor. So it felt like that sort of like sense of being a kid. And then they would just like pick up something and just start painting or creating themselves. And it was so wonderful to see this person that was so reserved move from the couch in their safe place to the floor, because once you see everybody else doing it, you think, I can pick up a sponge and throw some paint on it and like dab it on a piece of paper and let's see what comes out of that.
Yeah. I get this image of you just sitting there kind of smirking, knowing that
Yeah.
it's a win, not an if, right? You're just, yep,
Yeah,
here it comes.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to circle back to judgment, but first I want to put like a big, bold neon sign around the way you helped people overcome their blocks was to have a direct interpersonal conversation with them, to encourage them to engage in a supportive community, and then allow them the space to ease into the work in that supportive community. Like if they want to sit on the couch and watch, that was totally okay. There wasn't a pressure, and allowing people to feel the energy, safety, and vibrancy of the community and ease into it at their own pace is what really allowed people to open up. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly.
And so then how does judgment show up in that safe context? Because it's inherent.
Yeah, so I would notice people starting to judge what they were making, be like, "Oh, I don't like what I'm making," or "Oh, I don't like where this is going." So I would be moving around to check on people to see how they were feeling and just being encouraging. Like you can always create something else, or just see where this leads. And I find that judgment piece comes up with whatever you're creating, and I think it's such a battle to silence that inner critic, because the point is just for you to make and then enjoy the process. Doesn't matter what it turns out to be, because no one's here to judge you. So that was the main foundational framework for it.
It sounds like another piece of it that may be helpful for people is to like recognize your inner critic is going to show up.
Yeah.
And so when it does show up, you can choose to listen to it or not.
Yes, absolutely. There's no way that it can stay out.
Right. So it's going to be there. And I think though, for me, it's like, so maybe I produce something that's quote unquote bad. Nobody died. Right. It's like, oh, well, there's not, but the magic is maybe something will come out that really hits you. And whether it's the product or whether it's the process, and hopefully you embrace the process as much as you do the product.
Yeah, hopefully you embrace both the product and the process. Yeah, I love that.
So, Nerissa, I did something similar to what you did with a couple of people I went to grad school with, and I used to call it Art Night. I was very close with the mother of the guy I was dating at the time, and she was always kind of curious. And I was like, Pat, come on, join Art Night with us. Kind of similar to what I think both of you are saying is for her, it was like, she's getting to hang out with like younger women. I was like, have a glass of wine, make something, don't make something. And I was able to kind of coax her into the process a little bit by like having her paint on canvas and just saying, if you don't like it, we gesso over it and you paint something different next week.
Yeah.
Here's my canvas that I have painted 7 times in the last 10 years. Like if someone was able to like scrape it off, God only knows what was under there. But that, and it doesn't have to be the exact image of what you see in your brain.
Yeah.
So kind of working around judgment, working around perfectionism, and really using the support of the community, the exploration of the process to take that pressure off the product.
Yeah. And I think the joy of doing it with other people, making with other people, where somebody would see somebody doing something and say, oh, that's cool, let me try that. And that sort of instant feedback, collaborative element really helps to get you out of your head. I just find it really powerful as well when you can do something like in a group.
Cool. Please use this DIY segment to inspire your first art night. I love that Nerissa eliminates the pressure through the unassuming materials that she chooses and emphasizes the warmth and comfort of creating within a supportive community. And as a person who has scoffed a bit at coloring books, I love that more success was found in the more open, no limits, big paper approach as opposed to the coloring pages.
So if someone listening is like, this is a cool idea, but like I've got my toddler's crayons and some copy paper, what kind of supplies do you think, if someone wants to host a kind of like art night or art event like you're talking about, just for a couple of their friends, nothing big, nothing extravagant, what would you suggest they like have around? You mentioned sponges and...
Yes, we had sponges. We had I think we use newspaper at some point to like dab in this really cool way. So you can use things like that. Sponges are really great. Bigger brushes. I think having smaller brushes can encourage precision, whereas bigger brushes can encourage just like splash and play. Having a large size canvas is really good as well. I think having things that are bigger, something that you can like kind of stretch out on a bit.
Yeah.
And I think like getting some kind of canvas would be really great because at least you have a material that has you feel like, okay, now I can like play and get creative on this versus just pieces of paper. Because I tried having a coloring night and I found coloring can be great, but it still has this element of precision and people didn't leave with the same experience. They didn't feel as unleashed. And so I think having an array of different materials like that could be good.
Yeah, I think it was great. Part of it was just using dabbed up pieces of newspaper.
Yeah.
How simple can you get? I remember in grad school, I just had a mural party. And it's like, well, where's my closest wall? And it was the back wall of my apartment. I didn't ask the landlord. I painted the back wall, and it was a brick building, a 3-story walk up, and I painted it white. And I had friends over, and we just painted the back wall.
Oh, of the building or of your apartment? Like inside or outside?
Outside.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
There's that risk-taking behavior.
Yeah.
That's more risk than I would take.
Yeah.
I mean, I was paying rent. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that my landlord might have an issue with that. And you know what? It's funny. He did to a certain degree. He said, well, it looked too much like it was graffiti, and he was worried that the rest of the building would get graffitied. So he asked me to paint over it. So I painted over it, and he was fine with it. It didn't cause any problems. I'm glad I had a flexible landlord, but it was sort of that idea of like, let's just have a painting party and we'll get together and we'll do it on the back of the building.
That's so fun.
Nerissa, I think Steve's painting party just like blew the lid off of our like nice little event.
I'm like,
I
oh.
painted a building.
Funny though, because I didn't even call it that. I mean, it was just like, hey, let's do this thing. It wasn't this idea of like, okay, I want to help people get creative. I just wanted my back wall to look different. So we're more than halfway through this episode, and we haven't even touched upon all the creative experiences and skills that Nerissa brings to the party. Pitter patter, let's get at her. Nerissa, you are a visual artist, and you're a musician, and you act.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
How did the other ones come about?
Yeah. Which was there a first? Was there one that led to the next?
Yeah, well, I was drawing and painting a lot when I was younger. I think that's what most kids do.
Mm-hmm.
And I won some little competitions. I had a lot of encouragement around my visual artistry. And then also for singing, I started singing when I was 6 and I was in my church. I had like a little pink boa and I sang Stop in the Name of Love. I got great feedback, and from then on, I knew I always wanted to be a singer. So my family was pretty religious. We went to church every Sunday, and I got my first Bible, and it said on the front, like, what do you want to be when you grew up? And I wrote down in my childhood writing, which spelling was just a mess, but I wrote down that I wanted to be a singer in a band and live in a mansion. So I've succeeded in the one goal so far in terms of being a singer in a band. And so yeah, I started getting singing lessons when I was 10 to 18, and I was doing private lessons and as well as choral work. So I was in community choir and then church choir and school choir. So the singing just continued from there. But I remember listening to artists like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and just being so moved by what they did, especially Mariah Carey because she wrote her own music. And there was just something about what she wrote and the poetry. And it still inspires my soul, but it inspired me so much as a child. Fast forward to high school, I got introduced to jazz artists like Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, and learning about their stories and how interesting the music was. So I started singing in the jazz band, but there was always music that I was exposed to. My family's Jamaican, so I was exposed to reggae music as well as a lot of R&B and gospel and that sort of styles. So that's a bit of the brief history overview of my childhood and adolescence. Yeah. And that desire to be a singer was always there.
Fun that with all of these things, you're active in all of them, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I should have said I did musical theater when I was 10. Wizard of Oz was my first theater production. I got the lead part as Dorothy, and I was so excited because I prepared so much for it. I prepared so heavily with, I learned everyone's lines. And I always wanted more opportunities, especially for music and acting. So I would search the classified ads in my local newspaper when I was in Windsor, just hoping to find something in Detroit or, Toronto that I could go to. And it's very different now for kids. You can just join America's Got Talent or whatever and just have these opportunities. So I was always looking to find my own opportunities as well.
So, and how old were you at that time that you were looking through the classified?
Oh, I would have been like 11, like 12.
Wow.
I just was always looking for what can I do, which had me decide to do a pageant as well, because I was like, this could be a good platform for opportunity for me. And there's a talent competition. I was always looking and how can I really get out of this little box that I'm in.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there thinking of this 11-year-old looking through a paper,
A newspaper,
and looking for these opportunities to do more with all these talents. It was amazing.
The thing that I hear in that also, Nerissa, is like for you, it's not just the creativity, the making, the process of making, the product of making. Like you really have like some serious drive, like serious innate drive. But like now you say a kid could go on America's Got Talent, but I think it's more than just that. You still have to have the drive to look for those other less obvious options, fighting to find your place.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because it sounds like that was your process, that you would look for these little opportunities to perform, and that you ended up in an unexpected place. Like you ended up in a pageant was for the motivation of performance, not the motivation of like the pageant. Do you find that like as you explore different outlets, they kind of lead you down this rabbit hole to all these different places that you wouldn't have thought of in the first place?
Well, interestingly, I think one of my strategies is following different people or noticing trends and what people did. So I noticed that Toni Braxton had done a pageant, so did Halle Berry, and so did Oprah Winfrey. And I was like, all these ladies have done pageants. There must be something about pageants. So that was one of my driving factors, was just noticing that there was a trend between some successful women that I really looked up to.
Yeah.
And I thought there might be something that I could gain from it. And there was, at the time, like a lot of learnings that I got from it, like how to put myself together and market myself, and how to do like a really great interview, to how to sell myself, really. I only did one. It was Miss Teen Windsor when I was 16.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I competed at that level, national level as well. And just like the kindness that you learned in terms of just being with other women and encouraging them. But yeah, I think the kind of methodology that I would use was just noticing the different patterns and trying to follow along with that. So that's kind of part of me being in London as well, just noticing there's all these great artists that come out of here. And so wanting to explore this place that has so much to offer. And I find, especially more recently, I'm really connecting to my voice more, and I have different artists that are wanting to work with me for singing lessons, and also just from my own songwriting. It's like I'm really rooting into that more to express things that I haven't yet. So there's been like this kind of guiding thing of noticing trends and then taking risks and leaps within those that don't really make sense to anyone else, but I have my own internal logic.
Well, so I was trying to make your process more organic, more kite-like, if we should go there. And it sounds like your methodology is much more your string. Like you have a structure, you look for patterns, you look for trends. That sounds like marketing. And you use that to find the channels that really allow you to be your kite and express your creativity and move in the way you need to move.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
I think before we kind of started recording today, you were talking about how you're just busy. You're doing the voice lessons and you're finding the way to make it in London. You identified London as this place that you wanted to go and fly your kite. So then it's like, how do I make that work?
Yes.
So then you lay out whatever groundwork you need to lay out. And some of it is just being able to make rent, but it's also like, well, wait, this is the place where I really want to fly this kite. And you're making it happen.
Yes. And it feels really great.
I think you had said something too about you got hooked up with some agents. How has that process been for you?
Yeah. So I got my acting agent in January, and then I got a voiceover agent in February. So this is all very good because it happened. I was able to get agents before COVID, and my voiceover agency has been amazing in terms of me just getting a lot of work at a time where a lot of people aren't working. So I'm super grateful. There was a point where
Mm.
I was thinking, oh, everything's changing here in London because of COVID, and this is so unfortunate, you
Yeah.
know. And then a friend reminded me of how I had expressed how I wanted to be working from home and how I wanted to be teaching lessons and just doing voiceover work. And he was like, isn't this what you said you wanted? And then I was like, oh, yeah, this is exactly what I said. And it's happening. It's just happening in these unusual circumstances worldwide.
Mhm.
It's lining up with what I actually said that I wanted to be doing more of. So I'm really grateful, I know, to say that at a time where it's sensitive for a lot of people around work circumstances, that I actually get to continue working and doing something that I really love. So London has really afforded me that opportunity to really be growing during this point in time in my creativity and in my creative practice and my creative work.
Nothing here, though, sounds to be by accident, right? This is all your
Mhm.
paving a way for yourself, which I think is impressive, like intentionality.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you're talking about with your methodology or intentionality that you look for patterns, you find paths to go down, you find paths that make logical sense that are related to where you want to be. Even the business job, the business creative job of marketing, you still stayed within a field that allowed you to enhance some creativity
Mhm.
is kind of what I'm hearing in your story.
Yeah. Or I stayed somewhere that it gave me flexibility in order to do more of what I wanted to do. Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nerissa had great insights while in college, and that she's taken up the charge of addressing mental health issues is amazing. So here's a PSA for parents of transitioning adults, college students, even high schoolers. And I mean this, really. Yeah, we want our kids to eat healthy foods, but queries about what inspires them and what they are creating is so much more important. Believe me, asking the question that I suggest in this section will help develop a better bond than any gripe about carrots and kale that you can muster. Have a creative outlet that just has been part of your life forever. I can't imagine, it seems like you couldn't imagine not having that be part of your life.
Well, I would say yes to that, but then there was the period when I was in university where I didn't have it at all. Well, I wouldn't say at all, but it just wasn't as prominent. So I was singing a little bit here and there,
Yeah.
but I was so bogged down by the need to get good grades and
Mhm.
compete with my fellow schoolmates. And that's where that low point came for me, where I just wasn't feeling good. I wasn't feeling like myself, where I started having those mental health struggles. Then I came out of it to realize what was missing was the creative outlet. So since then, it's just been necessary for me to incorporate those for my own well-being. And so I really advocate for other people to have something that's a creative outlet for them. It doesn't have to look like what I'm doing, either like, you know, it might be cooking for you or gardening for you, but there's just some element of you being able to create and use that ability to express yourself in the world.
Yeah, the way that sounds to me is that when perfectionism and competition overrode creativity for you, that actually made things a lot worse.
Yes.
A lot worse. And when you let go of the perfectionism, let go of the comparison to other people and allowed your creativity to have more room to move, you felt better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really wraps it up well.
Do your parents recognize that? I mean, like when your mom calls, instead of, are you eating your vegetables? Is she saying, are you creating?
No, I wish she
You know what
did.
I mean?
I wish she did. That'd be really nice.
Right?
But, you know, I was just telling her how I've been trying a new way of songwriting, and she was just like, oh, that's great. You know, she was really positive around that. So, and there was no like, oh, I hope you change and go work for, you know, a hydro company. Because there was a season of my life where there was like, you know, can you just go and work at this hydro company and have like a stable job? And I was like, if you say that you think I'm going to do great things and you say that you know what I'm capable of, I just didn't see how that aligned with me working at this steady job. Where was this like this sense of what I'm capable of doing really coming out? Because I know that there's more for me to do.
That really struck me in thinking about messages that are given to children specifically around creativity. You can do anything, you can do great things, you're so talented, but also could you just do this other thing, that go work at a hydro company or whatever the
Yeah.
family's version of that is. It almost undermines the authenticity or the like intensity of like you can do great things. I think if I got that I'm hearing that message and I'm like, well, wait a minute, do do you really believe I can do great things? Because now I'm confused.
Yeah.
Was that like an experience for you?
It was like that because I'm like, you say you see me on stages, and she just wanted to be like alive to witness these things. I would just be like, well, how exactly does that align with all that I'm capable of, with sitting at an office all day and just coming home from work after at the end of the day. So there was just that, but then I just had to get that there was just this aspect of wanting stability. Now I'd say my family is quite supportive of what I'm doing because they can see that I'm making money off it. I'm able to provide for myself. So there isn't that same push to change everything, but it's been a long time coming, definitely. And we've had to go through a lot of shifts to be able to be at a place where we can just talk about my career and how it's going.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the dust job. Oftentimes, they pay the rent and they afford one the ability to have a really killer hobby. So in this section, we're going to dig a little bit into Nerissa's songwriting. Speaking of little shifts, it's kind of a shift. What type of music are you writing? What types of things do you see yourself kind of actively processing?
Yeah. The genre is still that jazz, R&B, soul.
Mm-hmm.
I have written a few that are more around mental health, and there's one that I'm still working on.
Mm-hmm.
The title is called Out of My Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we're in our head, like that's actually it's not good for us, anyone, to be in your head all the time. And so being out of your mind, meaning being outside of your head, and what if that's actually a good thing? I really want to demystify some aspects of what people think around mental health and use my music in order to create messages around that, around resilience and around being in dark periods and being able to come out of that. And then, of course, I'm still like writing about love because that's just something that we all relate to. But a greater message in terms of what I want to write about is definitely around mental health for sure.
Yeah. How's it feel to write about that? Do you find yourself continuing to kind of discover or have thoughts or come to new resolutions as you go through that process?
Yeah, and sometimes it's reconciling dark periods of my life and seeing that on paper and then thinking, oh, well, I think, that's where the judgment comes in. It's like, oh, is this too dark? Is this too deep? Is this not, melodic and springy enough, like happy enough?
Yeah.
But I think there is that music that is also there for people going through difficult periods. So I think everything has its place, because I definitely have upbeat music as well. But then there's also this other side that's kind of processing those harder times. So I want to be able to have music that goes from like that darker period to like a place of resilience. And so that's a big thing for me. Music that translates the message of resilience.
I think there's definitely a place for both. When we write it, we process things, and there's just discoveries. When I draw something or whenever I come across a line in a song, it's like, holy cow, did I just say that? Or did I just think that? And then it gets me thinking about so many other things, and it just allows me to explore another space in my brain because it was opened up by that one little turn of phrase that I happened across. And I think that's an amazing process.
Yeah. And I find not only music and lyrics, but also just people and their stories really inspires me as well. So I love hearing other people's stories and their journeys. It helps to sometimes guide what I'm creating or what I choose to
You want to make music that's reflective of the entirety of the human experience.
I think the biggest challenge throughout the writing process, like the song Out of My Mind, is that vulnerability, because I do want to be sharing honestly, but then it also takes something to bring forth that personal story. But it's a beautiful process in terms of owning my own story. Just done speaking engagements, I've had ownership of my story because I'm actually writing and sharing that from an empowered place. And songwriting can be so that as well.
I like that, expressing from an empowered place. That feels good to say that. I love it when people use the arts to actively explore internal struggles or painful things that we see in the world that ends up eating at our souls. Nerissa is truly gifted in that she has multiple ways to seek resolve. Also in this section, Catherine will indeed demonstrate why she holds the title of Kites and Strings Official Minister of Metaphors. Whether it's COVID or there's a lot going on in the world, are there things that do you see that tapping into your creative process at all?
Yeah, I want to write more about social issues like what's been happening around the world around Black Lives Matter and things like that. I think there hasn't been a real message that's come through me to express yet in terms of music, but in terms of visual arts, like I've been sketching more images that are empowered Black women as well. So I think it's kind of coming through that. It does move through me from the sense of a sense of like mourning and a sense of loss, a sense of grief, and that sense of darkness that needs to be moved through and then expressed as well.
That was going to be my question, is like writing from a place of empowerment. Do you ever write from the place of mourning or grief or despair?
I did write a song that it's called Falling, and it's like, I'm falling back down. And I just thought about being at the bottom of a well and just being stuck there and trying to get out, but not being able to.
Yeah.
Only at the very last line is like, I'm someone that won't stay down. I am someone that won't stay down. Is the only like hopeful line in it.
Yeah.
I do want to have that little glimmer of hope at the end, at least if there's like that one line.
When I heard in that, there's something there, but as far as like musically, you're waiting for the words to form. You know it's going to be there. It just isn't there yet. I mean, I think that you're in a unique position. You have all these different avenues for this thing, whatever it might be, to form. You don't really always know exactly when or how it's going to come out, but it's going to come out in an image or music or something. And that's got to feel, I would imagine that feels good to know that you have all these outlets.
Yeah. It does. Yeah, outlets for expression in these areas that I can storytell. I think storytelling is so important for all of us, no matter what method we use. Even if it's just journaling, that can be a really great opportunity to just express yourself, and writing from where you are and letting that be okay and let that be right, because that's what so cool. is really important as well.
Yeah. We've been all over the map today with like past, present, even a little bit of future. You've given us little like bits to look forward to with your music. And like some of the things that I've really picked up personally from you is being where you are and that being okay. The value also, not just of your internal process, but of other people. In hearing your story, you had this innate creativity that in your childhood was encouraged, maybe not as your plan A. And so having the support of that, and then finding community and role models like Mariah Carey and Toni Braxton and Oprah Winfrey, and like letting other people guide you, and then creating community for other people and creating safe spaces for self-expression. And
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, go Nerissa. You are all aspects of our kite and string metaphor. You're like, wait a minute, I would like to go fly my kite in London because London has optimal kite flying conditions. Then you go methodically and figure out, like, how will I get my kite to London? There is your string, and now you're in London, and your kite is there, and then COVID's like, nope, you got to fly it inside. And you're like, well, great, I wanted to fly it inside anyway. You're all the things.
You find a way, and that's so cool.
Oh, thank you.
It was so much fun catching up with an artist who's on the rise, who not only learned from, but is taking up the cause of mental health awareness along the way. Even though it might not land you on a TED stage or on the stage of Carnegie Hall like Nerissa, I think if we all try, we can find some means to express even the darkest thoughts and feelings, be it through drawing, writing music, acting, or simply writing in a personal journal. Nerissa has multiple creative outlets, and it's not always known which one will be the next conduit for her necessary expression. Hopefully we can all find at least one of those outlets. Our website is www.kitesandstrings.com, where you will find some pics from today's episode as well as past episodes. We will also have a link to nerissabradley.com on our website. If you have a moment to drop an idea, a suggestion, or information about somebody you know who is uniquely creative, please email us at kitesandstringspodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. The Kites and Strings theme music is by Harrison Amir, and all other original music is from Pixabay Music. Their website is pixabay.com. Today's episode was produced and edited by me, Steve Plume, at Turning Stones Counseling, Inc. Be safe.